Hello, survivors, and welcome to Raw Authentic Advice. My name is Mari. I am an activist, mentor, and abuse recovery coach. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And today we have another episode of Empowerment Conversations. We are having another guest. Her name is Renata McElvany. She is a self worth coach, an artist, and a writer, and she guides intuitive women in their healing journey to create a life on their own terms. In this platform, I talk about raw and authentic advice on how to heal from toxic relationships so that we can learn to build a better life after abuse. We talk a lot about survivorship and resilience, and this is a safe space for survivors and survivors who have been through either toxic relationships or narcissistic abuse. So, with that said, I welcome Renata to hang out with us today and give us a lot of this interesting insights regarding identity. We're going to be touching into creative journaling as a tool for survivors to explore identity. And I'm very excited to learn more from Renata, who is an expert in this topic. She also is an expert journaling. Renata, give us a little bit more background in your craft and in yourself as an artist.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Mari. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited. So, definitely, I'll go ahead and get started and share a little bit more about myself. So, definitely, I think of myself as an artist, a graphic designer, a writer, and overall just a creative person. I was actually born in Mexico City and came to the United States in the year 2000. And since then, I think my immigration experience has definitely impacted me and has informed who I've become as a person. Throughout the years, I've explored music, and definitely punk rock was a big thing for me that was kind of like my introduction to self empowerment and doing things for yourself, DIY, como decimos in English. And and so that was sort of my first introduction. That led me to explore graphic design in college, and I studied art, studio art. And so I continued to explore expression, creative expression in different forms. I saw it through the music, and then I saw it through my college experience. After that, I got out of school, and I started working professionally in my field as a graphic designer. I started to just work full time, and I was surprised and really shocked the day that I was laid off. And that sort of started this whole existential crisis for me, because up to that point, I had done what I perceived to be all the right things. I had gone to school, I had gotten good grades, I had graduated, I had gotten this job, and I was really excited about the possibilities of my for my life. And in a way, I kind of didn't know how to deal with failure or with what I perceived like a huge obstacle because at that point I had bills to pay. And so losing my job felt very damaging, very difficult to deal with. And yeah, like I said, I had this crisis, and I think that was the beginning of my really deep healing journey and my personal growth journey. And I began to explore a lot of the things that I was really passionate about that I think I wasn't really paying attention to as much because I was really worried about the bills and just being responsible. And I think in hindsight, I can look back and I think that was the greatest opportunity for me, because it gave me the starting point to really look at what I wanted to do in my life. And as I started to do more personal growth work, I learned about how to kind of combine all the passions that I have, which is, like I've mentioned, some of the art, the music, my experience with immigration, journaling, self empowerment. All those pieces came together, and I think now I can look back and I think I've been through an amazing journey. It has by no means been easy, but I think it has definitely inspired my life's work, which is to support other women like myself who have also gone through similar experiences with difficult relationships, with immigration, and trying to figure out who they are in the midst of it all.
Thank you so much, Renata, for that introduction. And thank you so much for giving us a piece of yourself. And it's very inspiring that you help women with being artistic and creative, and as well with being able to explore a little bit of who they are. And I think that is a very interesting approach to healing. And I will definitely love to learn a little bit more. But before we jump into that, why don't we talk a little bit about toxic relationships? If you have had any experience yourself, or you've known any other people who've been through toxic relationships, and how this work can positively impact a person that's struggling with toxic relationships.
Sure. Yeah, I think definitely I've had my own experiences with toxic relationships. I think when you're in that situation, you don't often realize, you don't identify these relationships as toxic or difficult. And so I do remember like being with friends, for instance, where I really wanted to help them when they were struggling, and I will see that they were making mistakes in their life, what I perceived as mistakes. For instance, getting into drugs or getting into trouble, and me wanting to save them almost. And in that journey, I noticed that I was kind of giving a lot of myself without really taking care of myself first, and then helping others. And I think that caused a lot of frustration and a lot of anger, resentment, because I couldn't do more. And I think there was a little bit of that codependency where I felt like I couldn't do things if I didn't have my friend with me. Yeah, like I needed people around me, because I was, in a way, I was afraid of being on my own sometimes. And so I think often when we're in those relationships, we feel like we can be by ourselves without feeling a little bit of fear or insecurity, because we don't feel we can make decisions, or we can stand on our own feet and just have a good time on our own. And I think you were asking about how this work, this creative journaling that I'm going to be talking about a little bit more as we go forward with this conversation. How does that help you with these kind of relationships? And I think that what I realized after all these years of journaling has been that I figure out who I am, what I care about, the things that matter to me. I've learned to how to ask more questions to my own self, to figure out what I want to be doing with my life, where I want to be with the people that I want to associate. And I think those are very important things that can come about in a very fun and relaxed way. I think we hear a lot about therapy, or we hear a lot about maybe coaching or other more mainstream ways of healing. And I think creativity and art can be a way of healing that is much more approachable, that it feels less intense, and that can be something you do at your own pace.
Awesome. Definitely, I think this is a tool they could use alongside coaching. I think a very effective tool. And what I am understanding of what you're telling me, it is a very personal journey to have a journal, because it really brings up the important pieces of who you are, and it helps you explore those pieces through this expression that you are doing. And I love that it's something other survivors could use if they're struggling with figuring out who they are, since definitely being in toxic relationships can negatively impact who they are. And I want to jump into our next question,
Mm-hmm.
and it is, how do toxic relationships and how do toxic relationships negatively impact identity?
Yeah, I think from my experience being in these very difficult relationships, toxic relationships, what I recognized was that for a long time, I I think the reason I gravitated towards toxic people, or people that weren't really there for me and were more of like takers and not givers, was because I was willing to be with anyone that was available, without really having any sense of standards for the type of people that I wanted to have around. I just would take anyone, and I think that came from not knowing myself, from not knowing who I wanted around me, who I wanted to be with. At that time, I used to think it was being picky, but I think now it's more being selective or conscientious about who should be in my circle. I didn't think I had these choices to choose, because I always felt that I wasn't good enough. I had really low self-esteem. I would just accept whatever came to me without really questioning it. And I think being in a toxic relationship feeds into that mentality, like that you don't deserve better, that you should just settle for what came your way, that you should never ask questions, that you should never want more. When you start journaling and you start writing out your thoughts, you start exploring things that you care about, you start gaining more clarity about who you are. And that was one of the surprising things that I realized when I started journaling, because for me the process was very intuitive. One day I just picked up a notebook and I started writing, And little by little, I realized how much I enjoy that activity. That was like the one and only thing that I personally had picked to do. No one told me start journaling. No one told me this is how you do it. It was just my thing that I wanted to do my way. And that in itself was very empowering because often we go throughout life, if we don't pay attention, doing things that people want us to do, things that our parents tell us to do, society tells you to do. And I think if we don't practice this muscle of creativity, of self-expression, of self-empowerment, of figuring out more about yourself, you get lost and you don't know who you are, and you just start doing things because it's automatic or it's because it's a cultural standard. You don't really have a choice in this in the matter. And I think that is incredibly crucial because that becomes a problem as I think as you grow older, because there's more decisions to be made, there's more things you have to decide, or you have to know what you want. And a lot of the time we can't go around asking people, hey, what do I want? Like, that is a personal thing you must know about yourself. And I think journaling little by little helped me to identify things about myself. And throughout the years, I've been able to kind of piece things together, and I've little by little have been able to define who I want to be. And the very act of writing or creating showed me that I'm a creative person and that it's something that I really enjoy. And I think other survivors, other people who want to know more about who they are can gain more clarity through journaling. And you're right, it could be a very personal process and it doesn't have to be scary.
You are right. And the fact that you can sit down with a journal, have a safe space to explore who you are, especially after being in toxic relationships. If you know who you are, you're going to know where to go next and who to hang out with later on. Those important choices that you make, where do I want to work? Or who do I want to hang out with? Or where do I want to spend my time in? What you mentioned about toxic relationships affecting your identity, a lot of that also has to do with how controlling these relationships are at times. So, having a journal to express yourself can be a way to have that safe space to hang out with yourself and spend those hours with yourself doing that self-care and time to explore yourself in a place where you don't feel people around you are going to judge you or they're just going to try to change you, because that is one of the characteristic of toxic relationships. Like, people just want to control who you are. So it's really interesting how journaling has been such a amazing tool for you, and also it can be an amazing tool for survivors to use and impact their life in a positive way. I would love to know more about how did you find creative journaling and how did it help your process of recovery from toxic relationships growing up?
For me, this process started when I was a lot younger, when I was a teenager. Like I said, I didn't really identify those relationships at the time as toxic, but looking back, I realized that they were probably not the best thing for me. And one of the things that I did for myself was often I go to the library, the local public library here in California, and I would just go and explore books. And that tells you a little bit about who I am too. I love learning. And so I was looking through books about art, and that was another thing. I was already kind of leaning towards art and creative expression. And I remember finding this book called The Creative License by Danny Gregory. And that book is basically a book that gives you permission to create and to make ugly art and just beginning to journal. And I remember they introduced you to the author introduces you to the art of journaling, and he made it seem so accessible. And I remember seeing and understanding how simple it could be, where you could just pull out a notebook and a pen and start drawing. And this were some of my early journals. It was literally a notebook, and I will decorate it with stickers, and I would begin filling them out. And I think little by little, I started to try different techniques and do different things. But I think essentially what I loved about art journaling was how personal and private it could be. Like, you can make it look like just a notebook, and nobody would probably open it because they just think it's another notebook from school or whatever. And but also very personal in the sense that you could be very literal, where you could write your thoughts out, or you can make images where things don't need to be so obvious, and which I will be sharing a little bit about as we go on. And so it felt very accessible, and I think that was the beginning of me exploring this art form. And I never even knew that people basically documented their stories, documented their experiences through simply a notebook and a pencil and a pen. How powerful that is to have a piece of your history, like written by your for you, for your future self, and how powerful that can be. I think one of the things that survivors can take from journaling is being able to look at their history, look at their stories, look at how they felt, or be able to look back and see the experiences that they went through. I think for me, one of the things that I recognized was that I have terrible memory because of some of these relationships. I There was so much gaslighting, so many experiences where I didn't feel heard, that I started to kind of doubt my own experiences. And when I read my journals, I'm able to look back and see that the things that I experienced were real. And I can look at the date and how I was feeling and the different things that I was doing and the people that were in my surroundings and people that were hurting me or that were helping me. And so I think that is incredibly useful as you try to heal, and as you try to understand your own story, you can see the things that you've been through.
Wow, toxic relationships, it definitely can affect your memory. Being able to go back and really look at the progress you've made, since survivors of abuse really suffer with feeling stuck. This person or this situation or this person that caused this situation doesn't allow them to grow or move forward, especially when it comes from early childhood, that it really stunts a lot of the development, a healthy development of identity. So I think it's really an amazing tool to really evolve that and really look at all of your progress that you've seen
Hmm.
since you started to do the journaling
Right.
until now. And I'm curious, how many journals have you created since you started?
Yeah, I have quite a pile. I have a huge box, and today I brought a few of them. But I that's some. If I could say, if there was a fire and I had to pull out, some things that meant something to me, they would definitely be my journals. And I have boxes and boxes of journals that I've collected throughout the years, and they're my most precious possessions.
I love that. That is worth a lot more than gold, I believe, because it is a portion of yourself
Absolutely.
and your identity. So I can definitely see that. So let's move forward with, what is creative journaling? How can you explain to our audience that is watching and want to know more about the process of being creative with a journal? Is there a rule? Is there a certain way that you have to create these journals for you? What is
Mhm.
creative journaling?
Yeah, for me, I definitely believe that creative journaling doesn't have any rules. It's something that can be your own. You can decide how complex or how simple you want to make this process. Um, for instance, I'll share with you this very early journal. It was simply a notebook that I picked up. And the way that I started was simple. I just began writing. It was a pen and a notebook. And I began to collect quotes, words, feelings, pictures of things that meant something to me. Maybe they didn't mean anything else to someone else, but to me, they were meaningful. I would draw what was on my desk, and believe me, my drawings were not pretty. They were not pretty. They were not what you would consider amazing fine art, but they were interesting to me, and they were things that I wanted to document, as I mentioned. And so one of the things that I want to make very clear is that you don't need to know how to draw. You don't need to know how to be an artist or whatever you perceive to an artist to be. This could be something that you can learn to do as you go. And you can try it, because maybe you don't like it, but my hope is that you will enjoy it and that it will be so accessible that you will run to your journal and you'll do it all the time. But it doesn't have to be complicated. You can pick up a pencil, a pen, a simple cheap notebook, and that's what I love the most about it, how easy it is to start some a journal with a notebook that you find around your house that you probably already have and you don't know what to do with. And you can begin writing things that are important to you, things that you want to remember when you're older and you want to look back on and think about. For example, I have this spread here where I printed my favorite lyrics of one of my favorite songs. I when I used to feel sad, I would think about a lot, and I printed the lyrics and I put them here, and then I printed images that reminded me of how I felt. So I didn't need to say I'm sad or I life sucks or I don't like where I am in life. I could pick pictures that I knew what they meant to me, and I knew that they had a meaning that represented how I was feeling. And so if somebody found this and opened it, let's say if you're in an environment where you don't feel safe and someone opens your notebook, it could look like you were just doing some research about a song that you heard, and no one would need to know that that is something that you care about or that it's important to you. And so they probably didn't care that it was there because to them it probably wouldn't make sense. This is a very simple way that you can start. It really literally is. If you find an image, put it in your journal. If you find lyrics, put them in your journal. If you feel like drawing, create a little drawing and write about it. Like, what does that mean to you, or what are you feeling? So I think I'll stop there.
Awesome, Renata. Really interesting. And I have a question for you. For survivors who are not yet aware of their identity, aware of who they are, what do you recommend? Like, how can they start this process of self reflection and self exploration at home?
Some of my favorite exercises to start to figure out what does identity mean, or what is this thing about who you are. Like, how do I even begin answering that question? I think the way that I went about it, which is something that I would definitely recommend others to try, which I think is a very easy way to begin, is to start with basic questions. I know it sounds really dumb maybe, but like I started here writing, I did this three circles in my journal, and I put here like, what would be my ideal job? What do I want life to look like for me? What do I love? And so for instance, I wrote for love, I want a good relationship, I want to be happy, and I want to laugh. I want to I just want to have a simple life. This things like this, starting to write down what's important to you. What do you care about? Like, what do you imagine your life to be? You can pick one question that you're curious about, where you start to jot down some bullet points. You don't even have to write a whole paragraph or a whole like book. You can simply start by jotting down things that you notice about yourself. These are the things that I care about. This is the kind of job that I want to have. You start to write things down very simply in bullet points. And one of the things that I recommend too is that you don't make it overwhelming, that you make it super simple and easy so that you can keep doing it, because you don't want to make something so hard that it starts to feel like a chore or like homework. It should just be something that you do at the end of your day, and you want to record something that happened to you, or something that you noticed about yourself. About, for instance, some of the things that happen to me often whenever like I can't sleep, I realize that I have all these things in my head that I'm worried about. Like, I need to complete my homework, or I need to submit paperwork. I literally jot it down in my journal. And I think what happens with time, you start to notice patterns of things that you think about, patterns about things that you want to do. Little by little, things kind of unfold on their own. It's a very organic process. And so the more you do it, you start to recognize things that you do, and maybe there's something there that you want to change or that you really enjoy that you do for yourself, and you're more conscientious and more focused, and you're like, I want to do more of this because I really enjoy it, and that is something that can set you off in that direction.
Spending a little bit of time of your day just thinking about the things that matter to you, your goals, your expectations of the world, your expectations of yourself. But as you mentioned, in a very relaxed way,
Mm-hmm.
not pressuring yourself to have these huge expectations about who you should be, more so to enjoy who you already are. And it
Exactly.
is to be able to kind of have more clarity about who you are and what you want. And I think it can really set up a place for you to begin creating a world that makes sense for you. You start to know who you are or what you like. You start aligning yourself with those things outside of your world. And I think it is a great tool because survivors struggle with knowing who they are. They struggle with intuition. They struggle with trusting themselves. So I think journaling or creative journaling could also be a tool for survivors to develop self trust.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely you nailed the you hit the nail in the head. I think that when you write, you start to identify things that are important to you, and you start developing a love for your own point of view, your own way of looking at the world. I think every time I'm able to read my journals, I'm able to write, I get more comfortable in myself. I stop worrying so much about everyone else's opinions, and I think that's an excellent exercise for survivors. I think often we grow up worrying a lot about other people's beliefs about ourselves, or what they think, our appearance, how we are perceived around the world. And what we don't often do is think about what we love, what we like. What happens is, for me, my experience is that, once you've been in that relationship and you're able to get out, if you don't have self trust, you don't know what to do, you don't know what direction to take, you don't know how to live for yourself independently and confidently. You're kind of seeking validation, you're seeking people to guide you or to tell you what to do, and you don't trust yourself. But I think the process of journaling allows you to little by little start to gain more clarity about what you want to achieve, what you want to do, who you want to be around, like I said. And in those things, they start to inform the type of person you become. And I think, like you said, it gives you clarity about your voice and in yourself as a person. And I think, then you walk around with more confidence, with more knowledge that you know what you like and you know exactly what you want to do. And that was definitely the case for me. It's incredible to look at some of my journals where I wrote, where do I want to be in 10 years or in 5 years? These are the things that I want to achieve, and many of them have become a reality. And I think the other part of it is that when you write things down, they are more likely to happen. I think there's a study out there that talks about writing things down being a technique for your brain to kind of start thinking about how to make that happen. So now I write everything down because I want to make sure that I don't forget about it. Not only am I able to review it, see it at a later future date, I'm also kind of training my brain to already start thinking about how can we make this happen? How can I move forward with this idea that I have? And I think writing it down is the first step.
How long do you think it takes for a survivor that wants to start this process with journaling to
Mhm.
feel more comfortable with who they are and their identity?
If you are a survivor and you start journaling, I think if you're patient with yourself and you do it in a way that makes sense for you, I think that's the key, that you do it in a way that makes sense to you, and you can start to see benefits rather quickly because of the fact that you spend time with yourself, the fact that you're starting to list things down that matter to you, thinking independently and not letting other people dictate how you should do things or what you should believe or like or where you should be spending your time. I think the very act of journaling and then what you put into the journal together make a really huge impact. And the more that you do it, the more that you start to see results because like I said, you're gonna start seeing patterns, you're gonna start to notice things that you do, that you say, that you think about, and things that are gonna become very clear to you, where you will decide, you know what, I really like the thing that I do, or the thing that I'm really inspired by. Like I really like I mentioned earlier with the song that I really like this band really means something to me. This is a band that I always want to listen to, that I want to buy their music, or I want to support this artist because they have made a positive impact in my life. And that's one example of like that helped me to realize how much I enjoy this type of music. And but that can happen throughout all different aspects of your life, of your being. You could see the books that you enjoy. Like I have a list of all the books that I want to read, and that's like that's how I started to realize how much I enjoy like personal development, because a lot of the books that I would write down were in that subject area. And so I think you can have a lot of discoveries about who you are by exercising journaling.
So this is more of a process that you will evolve with time, an activity that you enjoy and you want to do and that you feel comfortable doing more than, pressuring yourself to get a place or having that huge expectation of you should be. So I can see that this could take a while perhaps, but it's just enjoy the ride. That's what I understood from what you told me. As well, like it seems like this creative journaling also creates clear boundaries within what the survivor wants their identity to be. A lot of times survivors really struggle with the concept of identity. Either they feel like they never have the opportunity to develop one. They feel like they're lost their identity. However, I believe that identity is something that you can always explore. It doesn't matter how old you are. You shouldn't see as like you lost it
Mm-hmm.
more than, perhaps you didn't have the opportunity to develop it. But using a tool like creative journaling, you can begin, and it could be an exciting way to begin. So I think it's like an opportunity, and it is a way to see it as an exciting way to do it. Also because survivors struggle with anxiety and identity, like it feels a little bit uncomfortable being true to yourself. And I think this could be an amazing way to loosen up a little bit and explore that.
I see it as kind of both ways in the sense that you will see results in the short term and in the long term. Maybe in the short term, you start to realize there's small things that you notice about yourself that you like to do a lot, or like I said, that you like to explore a lot. But in the long term, you'll start to see things that you went through. When you can look back and 5 years of journaling, you start to realize the fact that you were able to keep a journal tells you that maybe you like writing, or that you like visual expression. That could tell you about something that you might do as a career, or something that you might want to do as a hobby. And you wouldn't have known that had you not done that for that many years. And I think that that is possible in anything that you put your time into. You'll start to learn something about yourself. If you run a marathon, the process of doing something like that will tell you something about who you are. The fact that you have to endure training, and that you have to go and run, and then you have to get ready for like the race, like all those things, every step of the way teaches you something new about yourself.
That's very true. I think we've talked a lot about the creative process, and is there something more that we could discuss before we go?
Well, I think I'd like to share a few examples of some journal pieces that I put together to just share with survivors what they can do, what are the possibilities with journaling, and the ways that they can start doing it today. So I'll share this first journal that I have here. This is a more recent journal where I literally just started jotting down with a brush and ink things that I was thinking about. And what I noticed in my writing, through my writing, was that a lot of the things that I say are very positive. It's almost like I'm reaffirming to myself positive messages. Like here I wrote about, I'm not in control. I don't always know what I'm going to make, but I'm choosing to be present, and the dishes can wait. And so to me, something like this is the writing process of it is so soothing. Um, and yeah, it's like I'm telling myself nice things to keep going. I have this other spread here where I'm putting the word breathe because I was feeling really stressed out that day, and I just wanted to remind myself, breathe, just breathe. And so these shapes might not mean anything to anybody. They don't have to be pretty. They don't have to be artistic. Like I said, maybe you're like, I don't know how to draw. I don't know how to start. Like I literally was just doodling. I had no idea what these shapes were. And then they turn out like little clouds, but they made me feel good in the moment. And that's really what you want to focus on. You want to focus on what feels good to you, not whether you should be an artist the way that maybe you imagined it. Maybe you're thinking like, I want to write something that is really secret or like something painful and difficult to talk about that I don't want anyone to see, and I would never want to write this in a journal because I'm scared someone might find it. One of the things that I would recommend you do is, like, for instance, here I have this spread where I cover what was in the background with more writing on top. And this is probably, if someone found this, they wouldn't know what was behind it. Like they would just see this and they wouldn't know that there was like a whole bunch of darkness in the background. And so literally these are post-its that you where you will write a message or a note to yourself, and you will just paste it. And that's what I did here. I collected a bunch of thoughts, And like I said, this was in the background. There was other stuff, but now no one can see it because I did that, and I did the same thing here. I did a doodle that looks like nothing to someone, and someone might even think it's ugly, and they might not even look at it. But behind it, I had glued it on a page where I wrote things. So it's a way of like also getting all the negativity out of you without feeling like you have to be obvious about it. Here I wanted to share this spread. It's I did some drawings of some girls, and kind of they remind me of how I see myself, my ideal self. But what I wanted to share about this spread is I literally was just a pencil and paper. There was nothing else to it. It's about how you use the page. Maybe you want to do a big image and some writing. But what I wanted to say is that I didn't need paint. I didn't need anything crazy or fancy. It was literally pencil and a paper. And here um, I have an example, um, where I went really crazy and I painted things, and I put this phase of this girl that kind of inspired me about. She kind of demonstrates how I felt at that moment, like really sad, really desperate. The colors that I use, maybe they don't need to look good, like I said, to someone else, but the colors represented how I felt, like a dark, confusing color scheme that makes no sense. And I just wrote a bunch of things that I wanted to say. And so, like, if you don't know how to draw, you can cut out pictures from a magazine, or if you have things laying around, like like stuff that we get in the mail that sometimes we just throw away that have images you can use for your journal. Like I was saying earlier, here I put things I will do. So it was almost like already validating my dreams. Like I put here, I'm gonna move out. I put silly things like I want to get my nose pierced. I want to get a tattoo. I want to have an art studio. And they were silly to maybe other people, but they were important to me. And like I said, maybe now I laugh at them, but they're things that really mean a lot to me. I even made a letter and I put here this envelope inside of it. I put here, open it when you're 30 years old. So it was like a letter to my future self of things that I wanted her to know. And I wrote, I can read it now. I'm 30 years old. And so it's like a message from my past self of things that I wanted to for her to know. And so, like I shared earlier, this journal here has images that I cut out from the internet and I posted here. So you don't need to know how to draw. You don't need to maybe write poetry. You can just write literally a quote, a thought. You can write out your to-do list. You can cut out pictures. You can paint. Literally, it's there's so many ways you can go about it, and you don't have to feel like it needs to look perfect. It needs to make sense to you, and you need to like it. And as you saw, some of my pages are ugly, some of them are really pretty. Maybe you can consider them artistic, but I think at the end of the day, I think what I take away from journaling is that all those moments where I felt scared, where I felt alone, where I felt lost, I definitely can say with 100% confidence that art journaling was the best thing that I could have spent my time doing instead of feeling sorry for myself. Um, and so I'm forever grateful to have found these authors, the books that inspire me to grow as a person, and journaling was like the cherry on top.
Really inspiring, and I really like how diverse those pages are. I really like how you encourage your clients to create pages that represent how they feel in the moment, to not think too much about the outcome of the page,
Mm-hmm.
and to be, just create what they feel in the moment, because I think this is such an important way to connect with who you are, with yourself, how you're feeling, and also how you're feeling has a big impact in who you are. It is intertwined with who you are. But the fact that you encourage your clients to express themselves through this art, to this creative journaling, I think that is an amazing tool. And I hope that some of the survivors that are listening to us begin with their creative journaling as soon as possible and right away. So if they want to know more about you and what you do, where should survivors that are coming to watch this video go?
Definitely. I will say visit my website, which is my name, renatamcalvany.com. And I'm sure we're going to have the link with this video. And you can, there on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. You can also um, check out my journal, sorry, my blog, where I touch on these topics. Also, if you want to see more real techniques, I also have a YouTube channel where I'm posting techniques for collaging and journaling. So there'll be more of that. I actually just started that process, so I'm really excited to be able to share that with clients. And I also, if you want to schedule a coaching call with me, I'm also developing this program where I'm going to be doing, where I offer creative journaling as a way to heal, and we can work through some of that together. So definitely my website is the way to go, and I'm always available if you have any questions.
If you are still watching till the end of this video, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel, Raw Authentic Advice, and to go ahead to Renata's resources as well and follow her as well. Thank you so much, Renata, for being here, spending your time with us with this really valuable and important information about identity. And thank you, to the survivor who stayed until the end and who is still taking care of yourself after the difficult experience of going through a narcissistic relationship, a toxic relationship, or narcissistic abuse. Thank you so much for staying in this empowerment conversation video, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.